Please read this disclaimer. This video's all the character name and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only, and it is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decision and those decisions are theirs. Hey listeners, welcome back to another out-of-world news story with Unraveled Tales, where time itself unravels its captivating tales and reveals the hidden secrets of the past. Prepare to embark on an extraordinary journey as we delve into the depths of history, Reddit stories, bringing you immersive real stories from different eras. Today's story is about, in all the 4 years of Opus's marriage, he had never realized there might be a very dark side of his wife's infidelity, which would always once threatened or abused. See how? I hope you all enjoying this long story. Okay, let's go on to the story. The world seemed to be spinning out of control as I sat in the front seat of the van. My mind was in a total mess. Those little bells that had been going off in my head all week were correct, but I had not paid serious attention to them. Something was amiss since last Tuesday evening when Sally told me she had called the doctor because of a yeast infection that she had contracted. She said the doctor prescribed some medicine to cure the yeast infection, and he also told her to refrain from having intercourse for at least a week. The manner in which she told me this didn't sound very convincing. It had been years since Sally had a yeast infection. She had learned how to clean herself and prevent the nasty infections from coming back. There were a couple more warning bells that went off in the back of my mind. I shook my head and said nothing. Sometime earlier this week, it must have been the first day when she was with him. Tuesday, she said. She seemed totally different and distant as we sat having supper. More bells were going off in the back of my head. After supper, she excused herself and went into the bedroom to lie down. I watched some stupid TV shows for a couple of hours and then went to bed. Sally wasn't sleeping as I came into the bedroom, but there was something cold about her as I got into bed. She turned off the lights and didn't respond when I said good night, lover. More bells went off. I just kept ignoring them. The rest of the week, she held this distant, aloft demeanor which had me so confused. Several times I tried to broach the subject with her, trying to find out what was bothering her. She deflected my questions and didn't answer me directly. I thought it must be the yeast infection bothering her because she was in mid-cycle. Although it was a busy week for me at work, Thursday morning just before lunch, I called Sally to invite her out to lunch as we had frequently done on the past. There was no answer at home or on her cell phone. That caught me as particularly strange because Sally, like most women, was never far away from a phone. I did not leave her a voice message. I called. This time the alarm bells seemed to resonate a little more in my brain. Whatever was bothering Sally needed to be brought out in the open. I just made a note this weekend I would get her away and we could then have a quiet time to explore what was troubling her. We needed to have a deep husband and wife discussion about our current relationship. I even thought, if the circumstances were right, I might confess my fall from grace and renew my promise that I would never stray from our marriage vows again. But now, in this horrendous way, Sally had thrown it all up in my face. Her knowledge about my tryst with Tina and the deep hurt I had caused her. Then, in a more spiteful way, she presented me with this sordid, revengeful affair she conjured up as a way to get back at me for the one time I was unfaithful to her. This was the reason she was so distant from me and had given me a phony excuse for not having play with me all week. Sitting in the van, my mind went over this whole sorry mess. True, it all started because I was seduced into having play with another woman. Sally then found out through an email from Tina, and without ever confronting me with the facts, she decided she would get her payback through her own tryst. It would have been so easy for her to confront me and extract a confession. She would have heard my confession and the promise I made to myself that I would never ever again cheat on her. With that confession, she would be able to extract a heavy penance from me for a long time. I would have told her that I was sick to my stomach when I came home from that week-long project session at the resort. When I walked into the house, I had the strong urge to come right out and confess my fall from grace right then and there. But I didn't. I didn't want to hurt her. I thought the episode would disappear and soon be forgotten by Tina and me. I felt Sally didn't need to be hurt needlessly. It was a one-time tryst, never to be repeated again. So, I hid the truth from her, only to have the truth surface without my knowledge. Now, our marriage is in complete turmoil and its future engraved out. The more I thought about this situation, the more I began to realize Sally had really pushed this revenge thing much further than she need just to even the score. I had not tried to purposely hurt Sally with my indiscretion. Nothing I did was so blatant as what she was doing to get her payback. She didn't have to sit in a parking lot like I was, all the while knowing I was having play with another woman at this moment. My fall from grace was done far away from her without any premeditation or her knowledge of my tryst. Now, after finding out about my indiscretion, all of her actions were premeditated and calculated to have the most devastating effect on me. It wasn't about evening the score or just payback. No, it was all about her being spiteful and wanting to cut me deeply by her actions. Then again, maybe she had found a way to end our marriage and be with another man. She had said how different and amazing play with another man really was for her. It was easy for her to blame it all on me. It was all my fault. She even came right out and said it was my fault that she spread her legs open for another man. But my mind rebelled against that indictment. Yes, I did have play with another woman, but not like she was doing to me with her hateful revenge. My mind was still trying to find a full justification for her continuing her tryst after she had evened the score in her mind. Why didn't she just drop it there? Why did she have to bring me here and rub my nose in her wanton affair? Just telling me she had been unfaithful would have been sufficient penalty for me. No need to mentally castrate me. But now, that seems not to have been enough for her. She needed to totally humiliate me and cut me to the quick. Our marriage might have been damaged by my actions, but her actions over these past 5 days are much more destructive to our holy bond. As much as I tried, my mind would not let go of the fact that Sally was taking her revenge to the extreme. This was more than she needed to do to punish me. Even after her first day with him, we would have had a good chance to put the broken pieces back together in our marriage. But now, I took a pen and paper out of the glove box and I wrote a quick note on the slip of paper. Don't come HOMEWE through. Your ex-husband. The slip of paper seemed to be screaming out at me. Think this over before you act. Could I do this? Could I end it like this? Could I walk away from the one woman I truly loved? But a little voice in my head asked, did she really love me as deeply as I loved her? If so, how could she be so hateful in her actions? Why was she threatening all night about us maybe going our separate ways? Had she made up her mind already? Was she going to come back later and tell me our marriage was over just to further humiliate me? Update: Opus was decided. He will override her decision by ending their marriage now. But what does the Opus have to do to protect himself? Let's see how he defends himself in the update. I got out of the van and walked back to the bar. I handed the note and a $20 bill to the bartender. Give this note to Sally whenever she returns. Okay. The bartender looked at me with a curious eye. I'm sure he figured out what the note said without even reading it as he took the note and money from my hand. I'll give it to her as soon as she comes back. I turned and walked out the door. A sudden wave of despair crashed over me like a huge tidal wave. My knees shook and my mouth went instantly dry. Tears welled up in my eyes as I stumbled toward the van. Before I drove away, I took one more deep breath. If I left the parking lot, my marriage would be over. If I stayed, my life might just be 100 times more miserable than it was at this moment. The club quickly faded in the rear view mirror. Tears were now streaming down my face. The ride home was a drive through a living hell for me. There was an urge to turn around and face whatever Sally had in store for me. My ego quickly stepped in and squelched that wimpy nagging voice. What's done is done and it won't be undone by me. My mind was a total mess as I pulled into our driveway. There was a part of me that wanted to hang on to the past. Hang on to my wife and the life we had before. The other part of me, now the more dominant part, began to push my thoughts to what I needed to do next. What happens after this split? What do I have to do to protect myself? What about the actual divorce? What about the living arrangements? Now, my natural organizing self began to take charge. Protect yourself physically first and foremost. Next, protect yourself legally. Take possession of the house and the bank assets. Get a legal restraining order. My mind was now working at deadline speed. Change the locks on the house. That item all of a sudden became the first priority. I went to the phone book and found a 24-hour locksmith. I dialed his number. I told him I had an emergency that required all the locks in the house to be changed out immediately. It couldn't wait till tomorrow or later. He told me there would be a $100 surcharge for coming out at night and on short notice. I agreed to pay the charge and gave him my address. He said he would be out within the hour. Next, my mind told me that I had to do something to keep Sally from having to get inside the house, since she only had the clothes that she was wearing. I went to the closet and took out the 2 largest suitcases we owned. Both bags were extremely heavy, but I managed to get them loaded into the van. It was the vehicle that Sally always drove and we both considered it her car. After parking the van at the front curb, I left the keys on the front seat and removed the garage door opener. Just as I returned inside the house, the locksmith arrived. He quickly assessed the scope of the job. It'll take about an hour to get all 5 locks changed. He said, "That's fine. Tell me if you need anything from me." I replied as I sat down in front of the computer. He returned to his truck for the tools he needed. I went to my email archives to check on the emails Sally had told me she found from Tina. The emails were all there, including the one Sally sent under my name telling Tina essentially to get lost. There was no email reply from Tina. The affair was over. As I sat there with the emails on the screen, my mind was mulling over the questions of why Sally didn't directly confront me about the Tina tryst. Why had she chosen to wreak her vengeance on me in this most destructive way? Was there something seriously wrong in our marriage that she refused to tell me? Was this her way of getting everything settled in one grand and glorious revenge act? As I sat, contemplating what I needed to do next, the phone rang. Somehow I knew it was Sally. The phone rang several times and then went into voicemail. With the speakerphone on, I could hear Sally's voice begin to speak. There was a trembling and tightness in her voice. "Oh God, Peter, please pick up the phone. I know you're there. Please, we need to talk. Don't end our marriage this way. Please, Peter, talk to me now." I could tell that she was on the verge of crying. I didn't pick up the phone. The line went dead in a few seconds. So now, she was sounding like she wanted to kiss and make up after I had met her challenge and preempted any future actions by her. Somehow, she must have thought my guilt trip would be so intense I would just lie down and let her walk all over me. Wrong. Sitting down at the computer, I pulled up our bank accounts and proceeded to move all the funds from the joint accounts to an account in my name only. With that done, I called the 3 credit card companies and reported the cards stolen. They asked if I wanted new ones issued. I told them that I would call them back when I wanted the new cards issued. The locksmith came in and told me he was done with all the locks. He gave me a couple sets of keys to the new locks. Now that part was done, Sally could not get back into the house unless I let her. The phone rang again while I was still on the computer. I had the word processor program on the screen. The phone call was from Sally again. There was more angst in her voice as she pleaded for me to talk to her. I ignored the phone and began to type out a 1-page notice. "Sally, do not ring the doorbell or knock on the door. I will not answer you. I have packed 2 suitcases full of your clothes and other items. They are in the van at the curb. Just take the van and drive away. After you find a place to live, send me the address and I will send the rest of your belongings. You stated several times tonight that we might just go our separate ways. You are right. Now you have chosen your path, you can walk it alone. Somehow I will find my own path to walk. Goodbye. Your ex-husband." I made several changes to the notice before I finally printed it out. I took the notice and taped it to the outside of the front door. It was quite obvious to me Sally would get a ride back here and try to confront me face to face. That wasn't going to happen. Walking around the house, I checked all the windows and doors, making sure they were all secured and locked. Then I disconnected the front door bell. No sense in having that annoying sound attack me sometime during the night. After walking around to my safety, I went into the hole, poured myself a Jack Daniels. As I reclined in my lounge chair and took my first long sip, my hands began to shake so badly that I had to set the glass down on the table. My mind just exploded into a ball of emotional pain. I started crying uncontrollably. It felt like I was in some kind of nightmare and I was trying hard to wake myself up. Yet, every feeling in my body told me that this was not a dream, this was reality. Then, I remembered the envelope in my pocket and the wet panties. The envelope probably contained a Dear John letter, I thought as I opened it. Photographs. No letter, just dozen or so photographs. I had no doubt in my mind what the subject of the pictures would be. I thumbed through the selection dispassionately, that it was my wife in those photos. I could see her face in some of the shots and her designer stubble in most of the others. It went on, each one superseding the last in its grossness, its explicitness. There was no doubt in my mind whose influence had generated them and whose hand was directing the action and taking the photographs. It was her lover and she was willingly submitting to his ever direction and command. Anything. She said that she told him on the first day. This was her final act of total humiliation heaped upon my male ego. That would continue to be me in the future if I lost the courage to end our marriage at this point. My first thought was these photos and her panties took its place. This was prime evidence of her wanton adultery that would surely weigh in my favor if Sally ever wanted to get down and dirty during the divorce proceedings. The photos and panties went into a Ziploc bag which I placed in the locked safe. Then I went to my computer again and pulled up the emails sent by Tina and Sally. I deleted each of the emails. After thinking about what I would say, I sent Tina an email to her new address. In the email, I explained that the last email she received was sent to her by Sally after she found Tina's email to me. I went into all the sordid details of Sally's revenge actions. I told her I would be filing for a divorce from Sally the first thing on Monday. I also told her just how fantastic she was during our 4 days and if she were to come to town, she should definitely call me. Finally, I asked Tina if she would have any problem denying that she and I ever had a tryst if Sally wanted to use that against me. I told her to reply to my email address at work. I didn't want any evidence to be on the home computer. I sent the email off into cyberspace not knowing what the outcome might be. After it was sent, I hit the delete button and the email disappeared from the screen and memory. Tina could either be a friend and deny the tryst if asked, or she could be one of the band of sisters and turn the tables on me. If she turned on me, that might cause more problems for me in the long haul. But I felt it was worth the chance to see just how Tina would react to the news that it was Sally who sent her the last email telling her to get lost. I was counting on her sympathy after she read the details of Sally's hateful payback actions. Update 1. Sally begs Opus to take her home and not end their marriage this way. See in the update if the Opus forgives her or kicks her out by divorce. Nothing more to do tonight except finish my JD, shower and go to bed. All of a sudden there was a loud pounding on the front door. Without even looking, I knew it was Sally. Then I heard her voice calling to me, asking me to let her in, begging me to talk to her. The banging on the door continued for about 15 minutes and then stopped. I remained in bed. All the lights in the house were off. There was a deadly silence throughout the dark house. The silence was broken by the sound of a car engine starting up and then driving away. I got out of bed and looked out the front window. The van was gone. Where to? I didn't know, nor did I care. Sleep didn't come easy to me. I lay there in our marital bed, a place where Sally and I had some fantastic playful adventures. Sunday morning I woke up more tired than when I had gone to bed. The stress and tensions were having their toll on my mind and body. There was no use in fixing breakfast for only one, so I got dressed and decided to go to IHOP for some food. When I opened the front door, I saw that Sally had written something on the notice that I had taped to the door. Please, Peter, don't do this to us. Don't end our marriage this way. I still love you and want to remain your wife. Please, we need to sit down and talk this through. Please, call me on my cell phone. We need to talk. Please, your loving wife, Sally. For a moment, I could feel my defensive walls start to crumble slightly as I read her note. But then, my bruised and tattered ego came roaring back and bolstered those defensive walls back up. The small voice kept shouting at me. There are too many unanswered questions here. Too much spitefulness to be pushed aside. Too much hatefulness to be reckoned with. I knew the voice was right. My emotions are easily swayed by my love for my wife. But there was the hard, glaring fact that she took her revenge far beyond the point where it was just evening the score. There was something there I never knew existed inside Sally's psyche. As I read the note again, there was no apology, no I'm sorry in the words she wrote. Come to think of it, there was no apology or I'm sorry in the 2 phone messages she left me. Why not? If she wanted to smooth things over, why was she not at least offering up an apology ... even if she didn't mean it? Something had happened to Sally last week that pushed her to move beyond her initial tryst with her revenge lover. My mind tried to grasp what it might have been. Nothing immediately came to mind. I would have to dwell on those questions a lot longer and harder to come up with an answer. Breakfast was very enjoyable. I was starved and the food was good. My spirits began to lift a little as I read the morning paper. Nothing exciting in the news. The Middle East was still in turmoil. So what's new? Nobody seemed able to broker a peace over there. All it was over there was seething hatred and retaliation over and over again. The thought just hit me. Broker a peace. Why didn't Sally want to first broker a peace between us? Why did she feel that she had to retaliate as viciously as she did? Why was her love for me so thin that my one fall from grace demanded her to totally humiliate me? As I paid the tab, the young lady at the cash register gave me a special look and smile. Have a great day, sir, she said as she handed me my change. Would this be a great day or not? Only time would tell. The drive home was a little easier. My hunger for food was satisfied and now my mind was focused on the upcoming events of next week. What about the divorce? Should I start it now? Should I wait a little while? Just as I turned the corner onto my street, I saw Sally's van parked in front of the house. Not a good time for me to have a face-to-face with Sally. I had not completely solved my dilemma or reached a place in my mind where I could find justification for all her actions. I quickly turned the car around and drove away from the house. Unless she broke into the house, she would have to sit in her van waiting for my return. Just like she wanted me to wait in that bar yesterday. She could sit there all day for all I cared. I drove up to the health club and got dressed into my workout clothes. This was something I knew that I needed. A strenuous workout would take my mind off the problems which were facing me. At least for a couple of hours it would. During my workout, I met a former college buddy of mine, Frank Keene. We chatted a while and he told me he had recently been divorced. My antennas peaked up and I began to question him about the mechanics of filing for divorce and what pitfalls a guy should look out for. It was a very informative half-hour discussion which ended with Frank giving me the name of the attorney who had handled his divorce. Now, I had some direction to focus my next actions on. I would call the divorce attorney the next day, Monday, and get the paperwork started. Maybe I would be better prepared to have that face-to-face confrontation with Sally, which I knew was inevitable. After the gym, I had a light lunch. When I got home later that evening, Sally's van was gone. No van brought a sigh of relief from me as I pulled into the garage and closed the garage door. Checking the house, I found everything in order. When I opened the front door, I found another note from Sally pleading with me to sit down and talk with her. Still no apology, no I'm sorry. I closed the door and locked it. A warm shower, a couple of Excedrin PM tablets, and it was off to bed for me. I needed the rest. I needed to bolster my physical and mental acumen for the events of the coming week. Sleep was deep and peaceful. I woke up totally refreshed. After getting dressed and ready for work, I noticed that the message light on the phone was blinking. I must have forgotten to check it last night. There were 2 messages on the machine, both from Sally, both pleading with me to meet with her and talk. Neither one had any form of apology or hint of regret in her voice. It dawned on me that she was holding back on any apology in order to try and keep the guilt monkey on my back. What a shame that our once idyllic marriage had come down to trying to dodge the blame for our actions. At the office, I instructed the receptionist and my secretary, Alice, I would not take any calls from Sally, nor did not wish to see Sally if she came to the office. Both women looked at me strangely, but I did not elaborate. Let them gossip if they wanted to. The fact of the divorce will soon be public knowledge. About 10, I called the divorce attorney who had handled Frank's divorce. An appointment was set up for 2 that afternoon. I went about my regular business for the rest of the morning. I even skipped lunch. At 1:30, I told Alice I would be leaving for the day and she could reach me on my cell phone if there were an emergency. As I was turning to leave, she said Sally had called 4 times during the morning. I said nothing, just walked over to the elevator. The meeting with Larry Finley, divorce attorney, went very well. He told me about his fees first and then we got into the details. I handed him the photos and the stained panties which Sally had given me. I did not go into details on just how I obtained them, I only told him Sally knew that I had them. He was about to ask for more details, but then stopped. The evidence I had given him and the brief story about Sally going off to meet with her lover was enough facts for him to proceed with a divorce based on her adultery. I did not tell Larry about the tryst with Tina. My hope was that I could make a better denial if Sally brought up the affair. If Tina and I both denied it, there would only be Sally's word it ever happened. I was still hoping Tina would see fit to move into my corner and support my denial. Lastly, I asked Larry to file for a restraining order against Sally. I wanted to have her put on notice she would not be able to contact me again. Larry said he would do that and all the paperwork would be available for me by the next afternoon. Leaving Larry's office with all the wheels now in motion made me feel I was once again in control. On the way home, I decided to drop back at the office to pick up a couple of reports I needed to read for tomorrow. As I pulled into the driveway from the east side of the building, I noticed Sally's van pulling out of the parking lot on the north side of the building. She pulled into traffic and drove away from the office without noticing me. Alice was surprised to see me come back after I had told her I would be leaving for the day. Again, I offered no explanation, let her keep wondering. As I was putting the reports into my briefcase, Alice came in and handed me an envelope that she said Sally had told her to give to me. I took the envelope and slid it into my briefcase without opening it. I'm sure Alice was dying of curiosity about the whole situation with Sally and me. Alice would just have to speculate a little longer. Update 2, from Sally's initial request to meet and talk, she now threatens to meet me or else. Sally was trying to gain the high ground again and threatened divorce. Let's see what the Opus did to her for her threats. I was about to leave the office when I thought I should check my emails one last time. After logging on, I saw there was an email from Tina. Opening the email, I read, "Hello Peter, I was pleasantly surprised to receive an email from you after that scorching email I received 2 weeks ago. I was shocked and truly hurt by that email. Now that I know it wasn't you who sent the email, I feel very relieved. I'm sorry to hear about your marital troubles that seem to have started because of me ... and you. It's too bad that your wife seems so full of revenge she had to do something as destructive as she has done. I know you will do what is in your best interest. As far as us ever having an affair, it's a secret I will never acknowledge to anyone. You can count on that. And if I'm ever in town, I will certainly call you and we can discuss old times. Good luck. Your friend, Tina." Now I had my backup denial I had hoped for. Knowing this, I would be able to fend off any counterattacks Sally might throw up during the divorce proceedings. I sent off a quick reply to Tina, thanking her for her support and mentioning I was looking forward to us meeting again. After hitting the send button, I deleted both emails. Once I got to my car in the parking lot, I opened my briefcase and took out the envelope Sally had left at my office. The letter inside was much different than her previous note or phone messages. This letter was much more defiant and more threatening. No more pleading to sit down and talk. "Peter, this will be your last chance. I have tried over the past 2 days to get you to call me and for us to sit down and talk this out. You seem bent on ignoring my calls and throwing me out of our house. Now you can either call me on my cell phone and arrange a meeting for the 2 of us, or you will be served with a divorce notice this week. There will not be another chance for us if you do not call me today. Your wife, Sally." Instead of being upset or feeling threatened, a smile came across my face. From her initial pleading to meet and talk, she had now moved to a threatening meet with me or else. Sally was again trying to gain the high ground. But the threat of a divorce from her was almost a hollow threat since I signed the note at the bar, "Your ex-husband." That should have made my intentions very clear to her. Driving home from the office, my mind was wrestling with several scenarios on how to respond to Sally's letter. I could just ignore it. The divorce papers were in the works right now. I had started them today. Sally was locked out of the house and for the moment I did control the high ground. Or I could set up a meeting with her in some public place and have the last face-to-face with her. I would have the divorce papers with me and I could serve her with them during the face-to-face meeting. There was no van parked in front of the house when I drove up. That could be a good thing, I thought to myself as pulled into the garage. Once inside the house, I could see that nothing had been disturbed and there were no signs that someone tried to break in. I was sure that if Sally had thought about it, she could have gotten a locksmith to come out and open the door for her. Maybe that thought did not occur to her. Maybe. The message light was blinking on the phone. Only one message this time from Sally. Peter, I left a note at your office today. I hope by now you have read it. If I do not receive a call from you tonight, I will have no other choice than to go see a divorce lawyer. The message was short and sweet. Again, the hollow threat she thought she could use against me. Finally, the thought that I should meet her one last time and serve her with the divorce papers won out. But I was going to have supper before I called her. Let her stew for a while longer. It was almost 8 when I finally picked up the phone and dialed her cell phone number. It rang a couple of times and then I hear her sweet voice answer. Hello? Hello, Sally. It's me. There was a silent pause on the line before Sally responded. I wasn't sure you would call this evening. It must have been my threat that gave you the courage to call me. Her voice was full of sarcasm. For a quick moment I wanted to slam her down and then hang up. But I was in control of this call. I would not let her take it away with one sarcastic remark. You could be correct, Sally. You keep wanting to sit down and talk about this. Do you think there is anything we can say to each other now? Maybe not, Peter. But I want to have you say it to my face that it's all over for us. I don't want notes and a cold freeze from you if our marriage is going to end. We were fantastic lovers together. If that's going to end, it has to be done in person. Okay, then let's meet. Tomorrow soon enough for you. Yes, where shall we meet? Let's meet for dinner at Mario's tomorrow night, if that's alright with you. That would be fine with me, Peter. We'll meet at Mario's around 6:30 tomorrow night. Agreed. Yes, Sally, that will work for me. I'll see you then. Good, I'll see you tomorrow. I still love you, Peter, she said as the phone disconnected. Well, there it was. Her final words were she still loved me. I thought for a moment about trying to play the card out a little longer with her. But then, I gave way to common sense. End it once and for all. Stop the game playing. So now, the final scene of this very tragic situation would be played out in less than 24 hours. Now it was time to mentally rehearse what I want to say and what I wanted to find out from Sally before I hand her the divorce papers. Sitting in the den with some smooth jazz playing in the background, I sipped my JD slowly as my mind went over and over the questions and the statements I wanted to say when I sat across the table from her. After about 4 hours, I headed to bed with a fairly solid script in my mind. Sleep was surprisingly deep and restful. It was a usual busy morning for me at the office. I made a quick call Larry Finley's office to find out when the papers would be ready. Told me to come to the office after 4:30 and all the papers would be ready. I arrived at the attorney's office a little before 5. Office lady told me that Larry would like to see me and explain the papers and the procedure that would follow my giving them to Sally. It took a little over 45 minutes for Larry to cover all the fine points of the process I had initiated. He told me the final divorce would take at least 3 months after both parties agreed to the divorce and the papers were officially filed with the court. Final update, it wasn't Sally's original idea to get revenge on Peter. It was her mother's idea. After finding out, it hit Opus like a ton of bricks. See how? It was almost 6 when I left Larry's office. The drive from there to Mario's would take about 15 minutes, enough time to be there for the scheduled 6:30 meeting with Sally. I entered the restaurant. The young lady at the seating station greeted me with a big warm smile. My ego wanted me to think that she was impressed with me and her smile was proof of that. I flashed back my most award-winning smile and then asked her if she had seated a Sally Harper. Her smile diminished a little and told me to follow her. My first glimpse of Sally sitting at a table. We walked up to the table and just as Sally looked up, "Hello, Sally," I said as I sat down across from her. "Hello, Peter. Don't I get a kiss tonight?" she asked as her smile turned to a pout. Using her own words that she threw at me in the bar on Saturday, I replied, "That hasn't been decided yet." My comment immediately put Sally on her guard. I was sure she thought her beautiful image would overcome my coolness toward her. Now she needed to develop another strategy to try and capture the high ground. The waitress came over and asked if we would like a drink from the bar. Sally ordered a white wine and I ordered a double JD on the rocks. Sally started the conversation as soon as the waitress left. It might have been that she wanted to be on the offensive and not the defensive side tonight. It didn't matter to me. I wanted to hear what she had to say before I went into my well-rehearsed speech. "I want you to know, Peter, this is not the way that I had intended our marital problems to end up. You know very well what started this whole sorry mess. I was only attempting to put things back in balance so we could restructure our marriage before we moved forward." Her voice was very steady. No signs of emotional distress. Just a slow monologue intended to set the initial groundwork for her next verbal assault. The waitress came back with our drinks. We both took a deep sip and then Sally looked at me very hard and continued. I especially don't like being treated like a villain in this situation. I only acted out of hurt and frustration at your misbehavior playing with Tina. I blame you for this debacle." His eyes are very intense now. He wanted to put me on a guilt trip and ignore all his subsequent sporting neglect. The waitress came back to see if we were ready to order. I told her to bring us some appetizers and another round of drinks. Sally sat there quietly waiting for an apology or rebuttal from me. None was forthcoming. My gaze never left her face as I took my last sip from my glass. "So, it's all my fault. There's nothing you have done that merits recrimination, is there?" My words were direct and firm. "Yes, Peter, it is all your fault. You even tried to hide your tryst from me. Probably so you would be able to see her again and have another 4-day duck session with her." Sally's words were more bitter now, the stinging bite of an angry cobra. "I only wanted you to see that two can play the same game of marital infidelity. How does it feel now?" Our drinks and appetizers arrived and I told the waitress not to bother us for the next 15 or 20 minutes. She walked away with a cold shoulder attitude. I didn't want to be interrupted during my speech. It needed to have the full impact weighing on Sally's shoulders. "First of all, Sally, let me tell you, this whole situation makes me sick to my stomach. Yes, I did have a tryst with Tina at the resort. I won't deny it to you. My only defense was the fact I was a victim in that tryst and not the seducer. I would have confessed the whole thing and told you exactly how it all happened, but now that's irrelevant." Sally perked up and started to speak. I quickly told her to be quiet. "If you interrupt me again, I'll just get up and walk out, leaving you sitting here by yourself." Understood. My words and body language told Sally that it was my turn on stage and she needed to remain silent until I was done. "I say it is irrelevant now because your actions after you found out were uncalled for and very spiteful. Once you found out about Tina and me, you could have very easily confronted me with that knowledge and you would have had a very penitent husband who would have been ready to receive your wrath. But you didn't. You conjured up this hideous revenge plot which went over and beyond just balancing the scales. There were 4 nights into your tryst that you could have still confronted me with my sins and then told me you had an affair just to settle the score. Any one of those nights, I would have still been the penitent husband and even forgiven you for the mistake I brought about. You said 13 times if 4 days, as you boasted to me in the bar on Saturday. Why 13 times? Why was it necessary for you to exceed the number of times you knew that Tina and I had intercourse?" Sally made a move like she wanted to make a comment. "Not now, Sally. You will have plenty of time to give me your answers when I am done speaking. Let me finish uninterrupted." My voice was very authoritative and unyielding to her. As I was saying, it wasn't the fact you felt a need to balance the scales that has brought this situation to a higher level of distress. I could have dealt with an eye for an eye. What I can't deal with is the reasons why you felt the need to exceed the parity after the 7th time or the 4th day with your lover. When you drove us over to the club on Saturday, you had more than payback on your mind. More than once you told me that the outcome of that evening was still in doubt and that we might just go our separate ways. Sally just sat there contemplating my words and the meaning behind those words. Her face was becoming a stoic poker face, no emotion, no outward signs of what was going on in her mind. That implied threat, that we might not be leaving together and that you could not be certain if you would want to leave with me, was a serious blow to my psyche. What had gotten you to this point, I wondered. My words were slow and very distinct. You had already said you more than exceeded the parity of an eye for an eye. So, what was your motivation for bringing me to the scene of your infidelity? More than that, what was your motivation for continuing your infidelity right in front of me? Why rub my nose and ego in the dirt? Why the photos? Why the wet panties? In all the 4 years of our marriage, I had never realized there might be a very dark side to your personality. A dark side which would always want to exact more revenge than necessary whenever it was threatened or abused. You had always been so loving and caring toward me. Although it may seem like a lame excuse, the reason I chose not to tell you what happened between Tina and me at the resort was the fact I didn't want to hurt you with my infidelity. I could see Sally squirm a little in her seat. She said nothing and her eyes did not betray her inner thoughts. The 5th day was about something else, something that drove you to want to totally eviscerate me, something which I am still totally unaware of. I have not been able to make any sense of the 5th day. It was unnecessary to achieve the balance you initially gave for your infidelity. You had completed your payback episode. You even told me that on the 1st day with Dan, you told him that the tryst would last only 4 days and then you would never see him again. So, again I am faced with the serious question of why you needed to take me to the club on Saturday and initiate a 5th day of extramarital play with Dan. Another short pause. Sally sat very still, no emotion coming through, no sign of what her response would be when I gave her permission to talk. All of these questions bombarded my mind as you walked away from the table on Saturday. It made no sense to me then, and it still doesn't make sense to me now. If you want to know why I left the club after you went off with your lover, the reason was simply that I could not come to a rational answer to why the total humiliation was necessary. There was more there than I could logically explain away. All of a sudden, I was faced with the fact I really didn't know you like I thought I did. I also realized I could no longer predict what your next actions would be. Sally's poker face changed to a look of an innocent little girl about to explain why she did something her father told her not to do. She ran her tongue over her lips and then began to speak. I think I know what you're trying to do here, Peter. You're trying to make me responsible for our marriage crisis. I'm not going to let you do that to me. You broke your wedding vows first, you opened the floodgates, and now you must suffer the consequences. All I'm asking for, Sally, is a reason why the 5th day was so important to you. Why did you need to carry your revenge that far? That's all I'm asking. No blame, just a reason that you felt the 5th day had to happen to make you feel vindicated. I lightened up my tone to try to get a solid answer from her. Sally thought deeply about my last statement and the question I wanted answered. On my way home, I called Mother and told her the whole story. After hearing my story and confession, she told me I was doing the right thing to get even with you. But she said that it would be necessary to actually do more than just even the score. She said you needed to be taught a serious lesson. It hit me like a ton of bricks. It was her mother who was behind the 5th day. Edith, Sally's mother. That was it. And all because I had a serious falling out with her about 1.5 years ago. Edith was a persona non grata in my house. She was literally a walking bish. She never had a good thing to say about anybody. Everybody hated her, or so she said all the time. Nothing pleased her, and she found fault with everybody and everything that happened to her or around her. Luckily, Sally and I moved to a town about 250 miles away from Edith after we were married. Even that distance wasn't far enough in my estimation. Still, Sally found ways to let her mother's negative comments about me and our life slide off her back. About 2 years ago, Sally's father had enough of Edith's whining and complaining. He packed up and left her. Several months after their divorce, Edith came to visit. For the first day, I put up with her constant bickering before it pushed me over the edge. Finally, I let loose with all my pent-up hostilities toward her. I made it perfectly clear she was a total bish and I never wanted her to step foot in my house again. My outburst caused Sally a lot of grief, but she stuck by me. The next day, Edith was gone, never to return to my house again. So, the 5th day's revenge was not Sally's original idea. It was her bish of a mother's idea. Damn, it was so clear to me now. I had never given Edith any thought as I struggled to resolve the conflict in my mind about the 5th day. Yet, now it all made sense. Sally was still speaking when my mind shifted from Edith to the words she was saying. Mother said all men are cheating, lying, low lives. None of you could be trusted to be out of our sights. She reminded me about my father walking out on her. She said you would probably do the same thing to me in a couple of years. Now Sally paused to gauge my reaction to her words. My facial expression undoubtedly changed radically when she told me about the phone call to her mother. She said I should go back the next day and have play with Dan again. Then she told me there needed to be a way to have me publicly humiliate you. She told me unless I totally took control of the marriage direction, you would eventually cheat on me again. Her plan was very detailed and very descriptive. I could tell that she had put a lot of thought into the plan. I had told her about Dan taking photos of our play sessions. She told me that I should give those photos to you just as I was leaving to have play again with Dan. Sally stopped talking and sat back as if she thought that her response had completely answered my question. It was as if her dialogue was another one of those I'm not to blame for anything that happened excuses. At first it was all my fault. Now the rest was her mother's fault. None of this was Sally's fault. That may have been true up to a point. But Sally wasn't a little girl who had to do what her mother told her. She was an adult with free will. Not only that, but she was my loving wife who was now freely consenting to do some very nasty and humiliating things to me in public. Although I now knew the reason for the 5th day, I was not about to let Sally off the hook that easily. She wanted to remain blameless and just move on as if everybody else caused the crisis. No way was I going to let her off that easy. I looked hard at her before I began to speak very slowly. So, the 4th and 5th days were Edith's fault. You didn't want to participate in them at all, did you? I paused as Sally nodded her head yes. It wasn't that you wanted to continue that amazing play with another man as you said earlier. You were completely influenced by your mother and her desire to see me punished further. That correct? Again Sally nodded her head up and down. My anger was beginning to build inside me because of Sally's refusal to acknowledge any blame on herself, and also there was her willingness to follow her mother's plan to totally devastate me. Now she wanted to duck the blame for all that humiliation I had felt. My anger continued to boil as I remembered all the events that took place at the bar and afterwards. In all that time, there was never a hint of an apology or any sign of contrition on Sally's part. She was continuing to maintain her innocence and laid all the blame on her mother and me. "I believe you're a ducking liar, Sally," I said loud enough and hard enough for several people to turn around and look in our direction. Her face immediately turned beet red and she started to stumble around for words to slam back at me. But before her words came out, I shot back again. "You remember it was me you took to that bar on Saturday. It was me you publicly degraded and humiliated. It was me you gave your bad photos. As much as you might deny any blame for yourself, Sally, I was there. I heard your words which were intended to cut me down, to totally humiliate me. I even remember the tone of your voice as you told me you might choose not to leave with me. All of the innuendos and inferred threats to our marriage were in your voice. Not your mother's voice, but your voice. All your actions were not those of one who was just play acting. They were the actions of a cunning, devious bitch bent on her own brand of vengeance. It might have started out as your mother's plan, but when the time came to make it happen, it was all yours. All your hidden hate, all your desires to rub my nose in your infidelity were there on open display in front of me. That's why I know it is over between us. Your loving facade was just covering up a seething anger caused by being raised up by that bitch mother of yours. You ducking salt. You wanted it all to happen, and I'm sure that if I had stayed around waiting for you to come back, you would have insisted I allow you to visit Dan anytime you wanted. There was no remorse in anything you did in the bar or anything you have done since. You think you are so superior and you know me like a book. Well, Peter, you don't have a clue. Now that I know what another man has to offer, Dan will not be the only man to share my body." She snapped back with venom coating each of her words. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the papers. Her eyes opened wide as her mind must have grasped what they were. "I don't care to read your book anymore, Sally. Here are the divorce papers that will give you the freedom to duck and suck any man you want from now on. There is also a restraining order which forbids any future contact with me in any shape or form. You cannot call me, see me, or come near my house. If you do, I'll have you arrested and you can spend some time in jail. I'm through with you for good," I said as I stood up to leave. Sally was speechless as I pushed the papers in front of her. "Oh yes, one last thing. There's a stamped envelope there so that you can notify me of your new address. This weekend, I'm having packers come over and pack the rest of your belongings. The boxes will be in public storage until you tell me where to send them." I dropped two $20 bills on the table, and as I turned to walk away, Sally shouted out, "You got him best. I'll show you who walks out on who." Everyone turned to look at Sally. I simply smiled back at her and mouthed a single word. Sold. Epilogue. The drive home was a complete relief for me. In the back of my mind, a new thought jumped to the forefront. I had read somewhere that if you wanted to know what your wife would be like in 25 years, just take a hard look at her mother today. That thought made me smile all the more. At least I only wasted 4 years on this latent, spiteful bitch. Better to find out now than have it surface in another 10 or 15 years. Like mother, like daughter. The divorce went though with only a single flare-up when the judge called Tina to ask her if we ever had an affair. True to her word, Tina denied us ever having an affair. The judge bought her convincing denial. Sally went ballistic and the judge almost threw her into jail for contempt of court. I have never seen Sally since we walked out of the courthouse the day our divorce decree became final. That episode happened nearly 3 years ago. I'm still not remarried. I date a lot of different women and I have a lot of fun with them. Whenever I think it might be getting a little more serious, I ask them to let me meet their mother. After a couple of dinner dates with mother and daughter, I'm usually convinced that staying single is the best life for me. Thank you, Sally, wherever you are, for that very important lesson. Thank you for joining us on Unraveled Tales, where time itself unravels its captivating tales and reveals the hidden secrets of the past. Prepare to embark on an extraordinary journey as we delve into the depths of history, Reddit stories, bringing you riveting and immersive real stories from different eras. Remember, this channel exists because of your support, and I want it to be a place where we can all come together, learn, and have a great time. Your feedback is vital, and I appreciate every single suggestion and comment you provide. Thank you once again for being such an amazing audience. We encourage you to subscribe to our channel and stay connected with our community. I look forward to reading your valuable advice and working together to make our YouTube channel the best it can be.